In the beginning, two people are standing on a balcony, looking at the vast city ahead. This man is none other than the prince, who is the heir to the throne of this country. He tells the woman behind him that their joining hands is for mutual benefit, so this is not a typical relationship. However, he also says that he sees no reason for them to remain distant and that they can be more honest with each other. Hearing this, the lady falls into deep thought about the relationship. Has anything like this ever been possible in the past? Even in her dreams, she never imagined having a partner. But the man standing ahead of her with his broad shoulders, could he be someone she can truly trust? Could he be the one for her? Now a flashback begins. Two twins were born. One of them would grow up to be the lady we have just seen. When they were born, their father was happy and believed they would both be gifted children. After all, they were his daughters, and he hoped for a grand future for them. One that would make the Grain family even stronger. He was excited to see what the future held for them. Their mother was equally excited. After a few years, we see a maid cleaning a room. She is busy tidying up, thinking that after this she also has to prepare lunch. When we look closer, we realize that she is actually the young lady who was standing next to the prince. Her name is Lady Liaris. We learn that she is not a maid, yet she is treated like one in her own house. A maid comes and informs her that her father, Master Grain, has called her to the dining hall. Confused about why her father has summoned her, she goes without question and sits at the dining table. Her father looks stern, not even paying attention to her, and continues eating his meal. On his left side sits her twin sister, who looks completely different from her and is also having her meal. However, Liaris is not served anything. We can clearly see the discrimination against her. In her mind, she knows that, as usual, her father will not say anything until he finishes his meal. She is used to it by now, so she has brought a book with her. But when she looks at it, she realizes she has brought the wrong book. Still, she has no choice but to read it. Through the book, we learn about this world and its psychic powers. The creator and manipulator of supernatural phenomena was a lady known as psychics. It is said that their ancestors saved mankind from a great calamity 1,000 years ago. Their holy power was granted to warriors, while psychic powers were passed down from generation to generation, mainly among the royals and the aristocrats. While she is reading, she is suddenly startled by her father calling her name. He asks whether she is aware that they are going to meet the royal family. She answers in the affirmative. Her father then orders her to be present with them that evening. She is both confused and shocked by this. He tells her that Medris' condition has not improved since morning, and he has no choice but to replace her. In an angry tone, he reminds her not to drag Alina, her twin sister, down with her. We can clearly see that even her own twin sister looks down on her. Her father further states that she will only be there to make up the numbers. Otherwise, she is not even meant to appear in public. In the esteemed Grain family, Alina is the only one with psychic powers. Her father reminds Liaris that she must stand silently in the corner of the hall. Alina also adds, "Don't get in my way. The future of the Grain family depends on me." Listening to all this, Liaris lowers her head but says that she understands. In her mind, she thinks that they do not even treat her like family anymore. But it cannot be helped. That is just the way things are here. She does not have any psychic powers. Both twins were born with high expectations from their parents. As expected, her sister Alina developed her powers at a very young age. On the other hand, Liaris waited a long time for her power, but the gift never manifested. Everyone wondered how, as twins, only one of them had the ability while the other did not. In a society where 80% of the royals are gifted, those without psychic powers are labeled as incompetent. Her parents were impatient. Even when she was 5 years old, they kept hoping that she would eventually develop her power. At a very young age, Liaris noticed how uneasy her parents were because of this. When she was small, she tried many ways to manifest her power. One night, she was studying as usual when her maid interrupted her and told her that it was very late and that she would get sick. With a sad expression, Liaris replied that she had to study because her father and mother had been cold toward her lately. Even her own twin sister, Alina, did not play with her anymore. She understood that it was because she had not gained her power yet. But her maid, who was the only person kind to her in the house, reminded her that this was slowly eating her up from the inside. She suggested that they go out together the next day. Liaris felt happy hearing that. However, the next day, When they were about to leave the house, her father stopped her and scolded her. He told her that, for the time being, she was allowed to stay, but if others found out that his daughter still hadn't developed her powers, they would gossip behind his back. Listening to all this, Liaris thought that it was her own fault. Exactly 7 years ago, one day, Liaris was standing at the top of a huge staircase, looking down in fear. She remembered reading in a book that after a serious injury, a person could develop a new ability. She thought that if she survived the fall, her family might grow closer to her again, and everyone might start to love her. Imagining a better future ahead, she took a leap of faith and jumped from the stairs. At the last moment, the maid caught her. She comforted Liaris and reminded her that she did not need to do something so dangerous. She said that since she and Alina were twins, Liaris would definitely awaken her powers someday. She should not take such harsh decisions or act so rashly. Even Liaris had been afraid to jump. With tears in her eyes, she asked Lori, the maid, if she would promise to stay by her side forever, since she was the only one who cared about her in that house. Without hesitation, Lori said of course she would, as she was her maid. In the middle of their conversation, someone interrupted them from above. It was none other than Liaris's mother. She told Lori that from the next day onward, she would become Alina's personal maid and would no longer meet Liaris. Coldly, she stated that Liaris was old enough to take care of herself and did not need any maid. After that day, Liaris was truly left alone. Still, she did not awaken any powers. Each day in that house became a burden. She was constantly scolded by her father and given harsh punishments for no reason. One day, her father told her that she was nothing but a burden to him and her mother. He even said that he wished only Alina had been born that day, not an incompetent daughter like her. This created deep mental trauma within Liaris. In her mind, she began to believe that everyone around her was suffering because of her. She wondered why she had even been born. However, she thought that since Alina was her twin, at least she would understand her feelings. But even Alina mockingly said, "Don't talk to me like that. It makes you look pathetic." This shattered Liaris from the inside. She finally understood that there was no place for someone like her in that house. So she made up her mind. No more talking, no more listening, no more complaining. She decided to live as if she did not exist. This, she believed, was the only way for an incompetent person like her to survive. After meeting her father, she walked out of the dining area. In the hallway, Alina called her from behind and rudely warned her not to mess anything up that night. She told Liaris not to speak to anyone and not even to look at anyone. She should be like a pillar with no eyes, no mouth, just standing there and doing nothing. Alina had a big plan. She intended to find Edward, the first in line to the throne, and do everything in her power to get close to him. She would make the Grain family even more powerful. Liaris thought that even though Alina was gifted with powers, she was merely a tool for the family. Unlike Liaris, who was seen as useless, Alina was a good girl. But in reality, she too was a victim of her own gift. After telling Liaris what to do and what not to do, Alina left. In her heart, Liaris felt sorry for her, but she would not help her. As Alina walked away, a golden aura suddenly surrounded Liaris. At that moment, Liaris realized that she had finally acquired a power, one that surpassed even Alina's. But she decided she would not tell anyone about it. It had all started on her birthday 2 years ago. Now we move back to 2 years ago. Liaris was sleeping and having a strange dream. She could hear someone's voice saying, "You should keep using your power. Come on." This was not a normal dream. She saw a lady who appeared to be a knight of the queen. The dream felt more like a memory. Everyone was praising the queen, but in a dark alley, a group of people were gossiping. They said her power was too strong and that she was too dangerous. One day, she might even bring the gods down upon them so they should kill her. The knight was furious upon hearing this. However, she soon realized it was not just those old people who thought this way. Even many citizens seemed to share the same opinion. The queen, however, was not affected by their words. She was aware that this knight was by her side. But one day, even this knight betrayed her and stabbed her. His eyes, which had once been full of love, were now emotionless and lifeless as he apologized to the queen. The queen was heartbroken. The only thought in her mind was how he could do this to her. Suddenly, Liaris woke up. She was confused about what she had just seen. The dream had felt far too realistic to be just a dream. Then, all of a sudden, her hands began to glow, and spirals of light radiated from them. She did not understand how or why it was happening, and she was unable to stop it. Slowly and steadily, the glow covered the entire room. In an effort to make it stop, crystal formations suddenly emerged from her hands. She realized that she was the one creating them. At that moment, she understood her power had finally awakened. She began to imagine how everyone would react to this revelation. Would Alina start being nice to her again? What would her mother and father do? In her mind, she pictured them praising her and welcoming her back into the family. But deep down, she knew the truth. If she revealed her power to them, they would simply use her, just as they used her twin sister. She absolutely hated the idea. The queen in her dream had been used the same way. No matter how much power she possessed, it was never for herself. It was always for the sake of her family and the kingdom's growth. She had been nothing more than a tool. That was the reality. People cared only about power, not the person who possessed it. With that thought, Liaris decided she needed to hide her power. Now, in the present day, she was heading to the royal event with her father and sister. When they arrived, Liaris was stunned by the sight of the royal mansion and the nobles gathered there. Everyone present was of high status. It was a social event hosted by the royal family. Noble families attended such parties to strengthen their relationships with one another. At the same time, the royal family discreetly observed who their supporters were. The noble families, in turn, identified which member of the royal family they wished to support. Of course, Liaris knew that the aristocrats' real goal was to marry off their daughters to become the next king's wife and gain more power. Even here, she was outcast. Her father and Alina walked ahead, leaving her behind. Inside the hall, her father showed Alina to Prince Edward and told her that this was a rare opportunity. She should do her best to get closer to him. Not far from Liaris, a group of girls were gossiping about her. They whispered that she was the incompetent child, the twin of Alina who had still not awakened her power. She must be the embarrassment of the family. The Grain family was one of the noblest families and had produced many talented psychics. Liaris must have been a shock and a disgrace to them. Even her father noticed her standing there and rudely told her to go somewhere else, as he was taking Alina to meet the prince. They left her and walked ahead. Liaris tried to find something to do in the meantime. She went near the food counter and looked at the dishes with innocent excitement. She took a little of everything onto a plate and began to eat. She was amazed with every bite. As expected of such a grand party, the food was exquisite, and she felt happy enjoying it. Even while she was savoring the food, she could not ignore the gossip behind her back. Because of this, she decided to go outside. If her father heard the gossip, he would likely get angry at her again. Outside the mansion, there was a courtyard with a fountain in the middle. She sat near the fountain, staring at it. She thought that Alina must also be having a hard time. Prince Edward, the first in line to the throne, was the closest person to becoming king among those present. Liaris doubted that Alina was truly happy doing what she was doing. Then she remembered what Alina had told her. She had to be just a pillar here. It was none of her business. So she decided to ignore everything. Suddenly, in a dark corner nearby, she heard something. She called out, but no one answered. She slowly approached the source of the sound, yet no one was there. She assumed it must have been her imagination. She let out a sigh of relief, but as soon as she did, someone attacked her from behind. But as the blade came close to her neck, her magical psychic reflexes pushed the attacker away. Even the assailant was shocked, wondering how that had happened. Liaris, too, was confused about who this person was. Suddenly, the attacker vanished from sight. Liaris stood there in shock. She could not believe that someone had just attempted to assassinate her. She thought it might have been a mistake. After all, why would anyone try to kill her? She calmed herself down, but she was fully aware that the person had intended to kill her. In an empty area like this, the assassin had taken advantage of the night. She felt somewhat relieved that it had happened in a deserted place, where no one had witnessed her power. Still, she needed to act before the assassin tried again. Just as she turned to leave, the assassin attacked her from behind once more. This time, instead of pushing him away, Liaris froze him in place. With cold eyes, she stared at him and froze his legs. The killer thought there must be another psychic hiding somewhere nearby, but Liaris told him that it was her own power. The assassin refused to believe it because a psychic usually possesses only one ability, and she had just used two different powers in front of him. Suddenly, Another assassin jumped from behind to kill her, but she unleashed an electrical thunderstorm and defeated him as well. She placed her hand on the first assassin and told him that her power was of a single type. In exchange for strengthening the psychic powers of anyone she touched, she could perfectly copy that person's ability. She then put her hand on the assassin's head and informed him that he would no longer be able to use his power against her, but she would be able to use it instead. She completely froze him in ice crystals. This situation was still new to her. She had never used her powers like this before. If it had not been for this unusual ability, she would have been assassinated by now. She dissolved the ice with her power and checked whether the assassins were still alive. She thought about calling someone for help when suddenly she heard a boy's voice from behind, saying that he had witnessed something interesting. She turned around, startled, and saw that it was none other than the prince of the nation. The pendant he wore was one reserved only for the heirs to the throne. Liaris was shocked and did not know how to react. She had no idea how long he had been watching her. He commented that the power to use multiple abilities was truly amazing. He called her by name and said he had heard a lot about her, then asked her to tell him more about her power. Liaris still tried her best to hide it, claiming that she did not understand what he was talking about and that she was merely the incompetent child of her family. She admitted that she did not know much about psychic powers. The prince stepped closer and told her that she did not need to hide anything from him. He introduced himself as the sixth prince, Edward Leviton. Hearing his name, Liaris remembered that the sixth prince was considered the most gifted genius in the royal family. She knew she could not easily fool someone like him. She thanked him for the compliment. The prince then asked why she was hiding something so extraordinary, pointing out that her entire environment would change in an instant if she revealed it. In her mind, Liaris thought that if she showed others her power, they would simply use her as a tool again. It was better to remain as she was. It was more convenient and safer for her. The prince asked her about her ability to enhance others' powers. He questioned whether the effect was permanent and what its limits were. Liaris explained that the effect would last until death, but it depended on whether the other person's body could fully sustain it. Hearing this, the prince laughed softly. It was clear he was contemplating the implications of such a power. Suddenly, he smiled and asked Liaris to become his fiancée. Liaris was completely stunned and shocked by his words. She asked why he wanted her to become his fiancée. Edward replied that when he became king, he planned to change the country. He had been searching for someone who could help him achieve that goal, and he believed she was the one. Liaris wondered what value she held for him. Edward explained that, as she knew, he was in a position to compete for the right to the throne, and having a fiancé was a very important factor in that competition. Hearing this made Liaris angry. She thought he simply wanted to use her. She argued that if that were the case, it did not have to be her. Her older sister Alina's position and power were far greater. But Edward remained adamant. He told her that it had to be her. There was no one more suitable. Liaris thought that the only thing he truly wanted was her power. There were many ways to obtain power other than marriage, and she could not fully understand his intentions. Edward smiled and told her they should move somewhere else. He assured her that he would take care of the dead assassins there and asked her to follow him. Inside the palace, Edward told her that his mother had been a non-gifted person, someone without psychic abilities. He said that she, of all people, should understand how non-gifted individuals were treated in this country. Liaris recalled all the dark experiences from her past. She knew this reality all too well. To make matters worse, his mother had also been a commoner. She had lived in the royal palace only because she was pregnant, yet the people around her treated her very poorly. That treatment did not change even after the birth of Prince Edward. In her final moments, his mother had told Edward that this country needed change, and that he was a very capable individual. She had said she was proud to be his mother. After that, she passed away. Edward said that she had been kind and that he loved her deeply. He had always wanted to see her smile, but he realized that was impossible in this country. That was why he was determined to change it. He told Liaris that she understood the suffering of those without psychic abilities. He had been waiting all this time for someone like her to appear. Looking into his eyes, she could see that he was telling the truth. It was not just about her power. He understood her position and wanted to change a world where only the gifted were favored. He wanted to create a world where his mother could have lived proudly. He truly believed in that vision. However, this was her life, and she did not want to use others or be used by them. Liaris said that she appreciated the offer, but she would like to decline. Hearing this, Edward responded in a cheeky manner, saying that if she declined, the matter would be announced publicly, that there had been an assassination attempt and that Liaris possessed psychic abilities. Liaris did not understand how the conversation had turned into a threat. Edward told her that whether she accepted or refused did not matter, because she could no longer return to her normal life. However, if she became his fiancée, her parents and everyone around her would be shocked. He asked her if even imagining that would not be exciting. Liaris admitted that it might be, but she hated both using others and being used. She asked him one thing to confirm. In the future, when his dreams and ambitions were fulfilled, would she be free from the so-called curse of being gifted? Would there be a world where she could live freely and carefree? Edward smiled gently and assured her that this was exactly the future he envisioned. He then extended his hand, asking her to accept his proposal. After much thought, Liaris finally accepted. Once it was settled, Edward smiled and told her that he would announce it to everyone. He brought her to the main hall. Everyone was confused about the sudden commotion. Edward stepped into the middle of the hall and asked his elder brother, the eldest prince, and Liaris's father for a moment of attention. He then announced to everyone that he had decided to make Liaris his fiancée. Edward's elder brother, the first prince, looked somewhat confused and asked if he was serious. Edward replied that he was completely serious about this decision. Liaris could not believe that he had declared it in front of such a large crowd. When she glanced at Alina's face, she could see how flustered and angry she was. However, Liaris remained calm and thought that her life was about to change drastically. Alina was jealous of Liaris, and everyone was gossiping. They were all saying that she was the failure of the Grain family, so how could Edward possibly choose her? At that moment, Liaris's father stepped forward and tried to interrupt Edward, but Edward's intimidating gaze made him stop. He asked her father if there was any problem with him marrying Liaris. Her father was stunned and immediately denied having any objections. Even Liaris was shocked to see her father looking afraid, almost like a child in front of Edward. Edward pulled Liaris closer and told everyone that they were going to marry. So he wanted Liaris's father's blessing as well. Her father had no choice but to accept it. As the head of the Grain family, he gave them his blessing for their marriage. Edward then told his elder brother that he would soon report this announcement to the king, their father. The first prince did not say much, but he gently smiled at Edward. Then he glanced at Liaris and said in a somewhat commanding tone, "Please get along with my younger brother." His intimidating gaze made even Liaris stiffen. Edward then looked at Liaris and told her that they would have another discussion another day. He leaned closer to her as if he were about to kiss her, but he stopped at the last moment and told her that he was looking forward to what was to come. Everyone was shocked. The crowd was stunned, and it was clear that Alina looked extremely jealous of Liaris. Liaris accepted that her fate was about to change forever. Later, Liaris, her sister, and her father returned to their mansion. Her father was still in shock, wondering what in the world was going on. What was Prince Edward thinking? Why had he chosen Liaris instead of Alina? He directly asked Liaris when she had gotten close to Prince Edward. She had barely left the mansion, so how had she even met him? Liaris replied that she did not know what was going on. Edward had not said much to her. He had simply announced that he wanted to be engaged to her. Even so, her father insulted her. He said there must be some kind of hidden agenda or intention behind Edward's choice. Otherwise, why would he choose someone so useless? However, he did not care about the prince's intentions. Through this engagement, their family could gain some influence in the royal family. He even told her that she had finally done something good. Liaris lowered her head and thanked her father. Even though she did not truly feel grateful, they were still planning to use her. They believed that her engagement to Edward would create distance between the first prince, Elisher, and Alina. Her father told her to make sure she supported Alina in any way possible. Liaris replied that she would do her best, but in her mind, she questioned why she continued to obey her father and sister like this. For what purpose was she doing all of this? She remembered what Prince Edward had told her, that if they got married, the people around them would be shocked and shaken. Yet she could clearly see that nothing had changed in her family. Her father and sister were behaving the same as always. They were simply trying to use her. They continued to look down on her and treat her as the incompetent younger sister. After some time that night, Liaris went outside for a short walk. Outside the mansion, Alina called her from behind. Her voice sounded rude as ever. Liaris turned and asked urgently what she wanted. Alina replied coldly, telling her to refuse the engagement with Prince Edward. Liaris was confused and asked why she should turn it down. Alina did not give a clear answer. She simply told her to do as she said and mocked her by saying that a failure like her was not suitable for the prince. Liaris could not believe she would say something like that, but she could clearly see that Alina was speaking out of jealousy. She was jealous that Edward had chosen Liaris over her. Liaris's calm expression only made Alina angrier. Liaris reminded her that if she was engaged to the prince, she could help Alina get closer to the first prince, Elishir. Hearing this, Alina became even more furious. She told Liaris that she did not need her help. She was not like Liaris. She was the chosen one. Both their father and mother had very high expectations of her, and she would meet those expectations. She had lived her entire life that way. She did not need help from an incompetent person like Liaris. After venting her anger, Alina smiled coldly and said that the engagement would not last long anyway. There was no real reason for the prince to pick Liaris. Perhaps he had simply felt pity for her because she was so miserable and weak. Maybe he just wanted her to feel good, even if only for a little while. Liaris understood that Alina was only trying to mock her and say whatever nonsense came to her mind. She remained calm and did not respond. Alina gave a sly smile and said in a very pathetic tone that perhaps Liaris had used her charm to seduce the prince. She even suggested that maybe the prince was simply hungry for women, which was why he had chosen her. Laughing mockingly, she added that perhaps the prince lacked judgment as well. In any case, she ordered Liaris to decline the engagement immediately. Liaris replied coldly, "You look pathetic." She told Alina that her desperation was what truly looked pathetic. She remembered what Edward had told her, that he would change a world that valued only the gifted and make it a place where everyone could live happily and respectfully. Alina was flabbergasted. Liaris had never talked back to her before, so this was shocking. Alina asked angrily if Liaris had just said something to her. Liaris replied, "Is there anyone else here?" Then, with a cold, mocking smile, she repeated that Alina's desperation was pathetic. This angered Alina to the extreme. The surroundings began to shake, and the ground cracked open in front of Liaris. A huge tree emerged from it. Alina was surrounded by a powerful aura, and more trees began rising from the ground. Her eyes burned with fury, as if she were ready to hurt Liaris badly. Alina's power was the ability to manipulate plants at will. She reminded Liaris that she was the only gifted person there, so Liaris should be careful about how she spoke to her. Still, Liaris did not back down. She reminded Alina that she was now the chosen one of Prince Edward and would soon become a member of the royal family. They were no longer the same. Hearing this, Alina completely lost control and launched an attack on Liaris. But this time, Liaris did not act like the incompetent little sister she had always pretended to be. She changed her approach and responded by using her own magic. She summoned plants of her own to counter Alina's attack and stopped it completely. Alina was utterly shocked. Hearing the commotion outside, their father rushed out of the mansion. From a window above, their mother had already been watching everything unfold. With a startled voice, she called her husband and told him to look outside. He saw Alina and Liaris fighting below. Alina could not understand how Liaris was able to use powers, especially the same plant manipulation ability as hers. Liaris laughed and told Alina that no matter how much power she had, she could not defeat her. This made Alina even angrier. More and more trees burst from the ground around Liaris. The trees combined and merged into a massive tree golem standing behind Alina. Alina shouted that there was nothing about Liaris that was better than her. She commanded the tree golem to attack. At the last moment, their father ran out of the mansion and shouted at Alina to stop, but she did not listen. However, the enormous tree golem did not scare Liaris at all. She calmly raised her hand and commanded the golem to scatter. In an instant, it broke apart and disappeared. Everyone watching was confused about how such powerful trees had appeared. Tiredness was visible on Alina's face, but she still refused to back down. She could not understand why she could not control the fight. Liaris replied simply that it was because she was now more powerful than Alina. We then see how Liaris's ability works. In exchange for strengthening another person's power, she can immediately copy their ability whenever she touches them. It had not been long since her powers began developing, and she still did not have full control over them. Every night, she practiced tirelessly to control her power, though she could barely manage the plants at first. Meanwhile, their parents placed immense expectations on Alina, and the pressure was beginning to frustrate her. One day, when Alina was walking down the hallway, a leaf became stuck in her hair. Liaris tried to help by removing it, but Alina smacked her hand away and told her not to touch her. However, during that brief contact, Liaris's hand brushed against Alina's, and her power activated. As a result, Alina's abilities grew stronger. Her manipulation skills improved rapidly, and their parents were overjoyed. Alina, too, was more than satisfied. Now, in the present, Liaris declared that she was disappointed in Alina because she had stopped working hard. She raised her hand, and a massive tree emerged, forming a golem far greater than the one Alina had created. Seeing this, her father, her mother, and even Alina were shocked. It felt as though their souls had left their bodies. Liaris firmly declared that she would become the fiancée of the sixth prince, His Royal Highness Edward. From now on, everyone around her should behave properly toward her. In her mind, she saw the image of her younger self, crying, branded as incompetent, haunted by a dark past. But that past was now gone. On the other side, we see Edward with his elder brother. The first prince tells Edward that he has turned down every engagement offered to him, yet now he has chosen someone on his own, and that woman is the so-called failure of the Grain family. Edward smiles and assures him that he is certain Liaris is exactly what he needs. The first prince does not fully understand Edward's intentions. Edward confirms that if he and Liaris walk the same path together, no one will be able to harm them, not even the first prince himself. The first prince begins to suspect that Edward has truly taken a liking to Liaris. Edward, on the other hand, seems excited and looks forward to what the future holds for them. The next day, Liaris goes to the prince's castle again. Every time she comes here, she is amazed by its grandeur. She recalls the events of last night and lets out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, she sees Edward approaching from ahead. Feeling shy, Liaris asks him if he came all the way there just to see her. Edward replies in the affirmative and says that he wanted to see his fiancée. The two walk inside hand in hand. Everyone in the hallway turns toward them and greets them respectfully. With all this attention, Liaris feels a little awkward. Edward tells her that she will get used to it soon. Otherwise, she will find herself in trouble. Liaris knows that she now plays an important role in Edward's path to the throne. Every word and action of hers will affect his reputation, so she resolves to be careful and to do whatever she can for him. Edward asks if something happened last night. Liaris tells him that she revealed her powers to her family, and they were surprised by it. However, it did not seem to truly change anything. Edward observes that she does not look happy about what happened, but she does not seem upset either. Liaris replies that she is simply disappointed. She has noticed that she has been looked down upon her entire life by people like her family, and they are not as shaken as she once imagined they would be. She then changes the topic and asks Edward why he called her there. Edward tells her that they are going to the throne room, as he intends to inform his father, the king, about their engagement. Liaris is shocked. A meeting with the king is no small matter. She knows that a prince's fiancé must support the future king, and therefore it is necessary for the current king to personally assess her. Edward leans closer and tells her to be very careful around the king. If the king is displeased with her, the engagement will be called off. And if that happens, she will have to return to her old life. In her mind, Liaris thinks that she has already attracted too much attention. Things are different now, and she has no place to return to. She must prove herself here. They stand before the majestic gates of the king's throne room. Liaris notices that she does not feel nervous at all. Then she recalls that in her dreams, she was once called a queen. It feels as if those dreams belong to a past life. They enter the throne room and greet the king. He tells them to raise their heads. Liaris and Edward stand before the ruler of the land, King Bestion Leviton, who sits high upon his throne. Edward states that he wishes to introduce Liaris to him and that he intends to become engaged to her. He confidently looks straight at his father. Now we learn a little about the history of this kingdom. About 700 years ago, the kingdom of Laban and 3 other small kingdoms fought a long war over territory. The war lasted more than a decade and ended with the victory of Laban. The kingdom was transformed into a great power, conquering all its defeated rivals. At the core of this success were the psychics. The kingdom of Laban maintained its status by actively incorporating exceptionally powerful individuals into the royal lineage. The man sitting before them is the 99th king of the kingdom of Laban. Edward asks whether he has the king's permission to marry Liaris. The king and Edward exchange a meaningful gaze, and Liaris feels that the king intends to test her. The king then asks Liaris whether she has the resolve to bear the weight of the royal family. Liaris answers yes. She has already prepared herself for such questions. However, the king suddenly asks her what she is capable of. He has heard about the Grain twins, and that one of them is considered an imbecile. If Liaris were to join the royal family, it would become her responsibility to help take charge of the kingdom of Laban. The king asked her again whether she was worthy of standing there. With an intense look on his face, he demanded that she answer him. What could she do? Liaris noticed that she was not being looked down upon or judged as useless, as she had been in the past. She was simply being genuinely tested, and she needed to prove her worth to the king. She confidently looked up and said that she would stand by His Highness Prince Edward's side and continue to support him. She promised that together they would make the kingdom stronger and greater, and that the king should watch them and see what they would become. Edward smiled genuinely at her words. The king saw the ambition and determination in Liaris's heart. He smiled and declared that, in that case, he would surely one day proclaim Edward as king. This was the first time a prince had spoken so boldly before him, and he was impressed by her proposal. With a calm smile on his face, he accepted their engagement and told them that he was looking forward to what lay ahead. Edward thanked the king, and they took their leave. Outside in the hallway, Liaris felt relieved that everything was over. However, Edward suddenly burst out laughing. He said it was amusing and that he had never expected her to boldly challenge his father like that. Liaris did not understand what he meant by challenge. She had not intended it that way. Edward explained that speaking like that in front of the current king was almost like declaring that they would eventually take the throne. After thinking about it, Liaris realized that it did sound like a declaration of war. She could not believe she had said something like that in the heat of the moment. But in the end, everything had worked out. Edward had noticed that his father had smiled in public, which meant he approved of Liaris. In his heart, Edward felt he had made the right choice. It did not matter whether Liaris had powers or not. She possessed courage that he did not see in most people. Edward then asked her, teasingly, whether she was truly going to make him king. Liaris had already declared everything in front of the king of the land, so she could not take her words back now. She gave a gentle smile and told him that she would keep her promise, on the condition that he kept his. Edward promised that even people without abilities would be able to live freely in this world. He swore that he would fulfill that promise. They joined hands, united by their shared goals. That was the true essence of their engagement. Liaris then told Edward that she would return home for now, and that if he needed anything, he could call for her. Edward looked confused and told her that her home was here from now on. Liaris did not understand what he meant. He clarified that they were now engaged, and starting today, she would live in the palace. Liaris returned home to pack her belongings. As she prepared, she recalled Edward telling her to come back as soon as possible. After packing everything she needed into a single suitcase, she was ready to leave. Her parents came out and asked where she was going. They had neglected her entire life, but now they were suddenly paying attention to her. They acted as if they cared and asked whether she was going to Prince Edward's residence. They even asked if they could come along, saying that as parents, they should speak to the prince and ask him to take good care of their daughter. Liaris felt annoyed by her father's fake concern. She told him there was no need for them to come. The engagement had already been approved by His Majesty the King himself, and it was not the right time to trouble Edward. Her parents then asked when she would return. Liaris replied that she would not be coming back. From now on, she would live in the palace. They could do whatever they wanted with her room, because she would no longer need it. She opened the door and was about to leave when she suddenly stopped and asked how Alina was doing. They told her that Alina was in her room and had not come out for meals or any other activities since the events of the previous night. Liaris turned back and said goodbye to her parents one last time. She asked them to tell Alina that she said hello. She even thanked them for everything they had done for her, though it was clear from her expression that there was a hint of irony in her words, as they had never truly treated her well. As she stepped outside, a maid came running toward her. It was the maid who had helped Liaris so much during her childhood in that house. The maid told Liaris to have a safe journey and to be careful. Liaris remembered all the memories she shared with the maid. It was this woman who had taught her how to survive on her own. Liaris sincerely thanked her for everything she had done, which made the maid emotional. With a sad look on her face, Liaris told the maid that if she was going to continue serving this household, then she should forget about her because she was no longer going to stay in this house. She knew that perhaps she would never be able to see her again. The maid interrupted Liaris in the middle of her sentence and told her that she would never forget her. She stepped closer and suddenly hugged her, reminding Liaris of the bond they had shared during her childhood. The maid had been the only genuinely kind person to her in that entire house. Liaris then stepped outside and saw that Prince Edward was waiting for her. She had not expected him to wait for her like that. They left together, and inside the carriage, Edward noticed that Liaris was looking out of the window at the house where she had lived her entire life. He held her hand and assured her that she had made the right choice and would not regret it. Liaris felt that his hands were warm and comforting. Maybe it was all right for her to hope for a better future ahead. But that night, she had the dream again, the one where she was brutally murdered. In the dream, shadows grew darker each time she saw it. She remembered the knight who had killed her, how kindly he had treated her in the beginning. The queen in the dream had touched the knight's hand and made him more powerful and stronger using her ability. She believed that he would obey her commands and stand by her side. He had even promised that his life belonged to Her Majesty the Queen. Liaris recalled the dream clearly. She was certain that she had once been the queen of a certain kingdom. People had praised her, and she had fought for the development of her kingdom. She had tried to fulfill the hopes and expectations of her subjects, thinking only of moving forward for the good of her country and its people. However, along the way she had made many enemies. She had trusted her knight more than anyone else, but he had betrayed her and stabbed her from behind. No one had followed her down her path of determination, not even those she once trusted. The only thing that remained in people's hearts was fear of the queen. They never saw her love or her vision for the kingdom. Liaris did not want her life to end the same way it had in her past life. After the dream, she woke up with tears in her eyes. She said aloud that she wanted to live for herself. For a moment, she was confused about where she was, but then she remembered. She was in the royal castle. She had been speaking a little too loudly and remarked that His Highness Edward was a bold man. Suddenly, she wondered what had made her say something like that. She reflected that everything he did and said made it seem as if he was always one step ahead, as expected of a prince. Then she suddenly realized someone had responded to her. From beside her, Edward said that it was not a bad feeling to be praised by her. She turned to the side and saw Edward lying next to her. Startled, she quickly asked what he was doing in her bed. Her cheeks turned red. Edward smiled and told her not to worry. He had not done anything. In fact, it was her fault because he had called out to her several times. But she had not answered. She had been like a sleeping beauty whom he could not wake up. He told her that she was his precious fiancée, and he could not let anything happen to her. He leaned a little closer in a teasing manner and said that he had not expected her to get so flustered. He complimented her and said that her blushing face was truly adorable. After teasing her, He started walking toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and told her that since they were going to be a couple, she should show him her true colors, just as she was doing now. She should not worry or remain tense when others were not around. His words comforted her deeply. He told her to come soon for breakfast and then left the room. Liaris reflected that she had never been allowed to act like that before. She had always been forced to suppress her feelings and wear a mask. But the prince had just told her that she could show her true self to him. At the breakfast table, Liaris was enjoying the meal to the fullest. She was amazed to taste such delicacies, and Edward gently smiled at the adorable sight of her enthusiasm. Edward reminded her that there were other princes in the castle, so she was free to roam as she pleased, but she was advised to do so with proper security. She should try to stay within the areas under his control and avoid unnecessary places. He showed her a flower and told her that she would recognize it. No one else was allowed inside that flower field. He explained that it was his favorite spot and that it offered the best view of the city. Now we see the same scene that appeared at the beginning of the manhwa. Edward standing on the balcony, telling Liaris that they had partnered for mutual benefit. It was not a typical relationship, but there was no reason for them to remain guarded all the time. They could lower their defenses in front of each other. Liaris remembered how he had been sleeping beside her that morning and how he had tried to get closer to make her feel comfortable around him. She did not think she would be able to adjust to this so quickly. The person she was now, and the person she had been in her dreams, had never been with anyone like that. But looking at Edward, she felt a little more confident in him. She began to think that maybe he could truly be the one for her. Edward turned to Liaris and told her that they would attend a party. She was confused at first, but he explained that the next day was his brother's birthday, the first Prince Elishir's birthday. Liaris recalled her first encounter with him and felt that he seemed somewhat troublesome. At a party like this, many people would be watching. She suggested to Edward that, if possible, she would prefer not to attend. However, Edward told her that she would attend as his fiancée. The party would be open to all royals, even those with the lowest abilities within the royal family. His brother would be the main attraction, but naturally, everyone would also focus on Edward. He needed her help so that he would not fall behind in the race for the throne. Now that she was the fiancée of a royal, she needed to act with grace. Liaris understood. She remembered her dreams and how she had faced situations like this many times before. There was no need to be afraid. She had stood among royals in her past life and felt prepared enough to face anything now. That night at the royal event, Edward stepped out of the carriage first. Then we see Liaris. She was wearing a beautiful red dress. In her mind, she wondered if it suited her. Perhaps she should have chosen something plainer. But when she stepped out, everyone could see how stunning she looked in it. Edward even complimented her, saying the dress suited her very well, which made Liaris blush slightly. They both entered the hall, and several nobles surrounded Edward, greeting him respectfully. A nobleman asked whether the lady beside him was his fiancée. In response, Edward gently pulled Liaris closer and introduced her to everyone. Liaris introduced herself with courtesy, but as soon as they heard her name, the crowd grew quiet. Liaris had expected this reaction. Someone remarked that Edward had decided to get engaged after refusing so many proposals until now. Edward smiled gently and said that she was right for him, right for the future king. He added that he hoped everyone would witness her true abilities when they were revealed, and that they would be revealed very soon. Looking at Edward's expression, Liaris felt that he was planning something. At that moment, the first Prince Elishir entered and greeted everyone. For Liaris, it was greeting after greeting for a long period of time. With so many eyes on her, she began to feel a little tired. Suddenly, someone called out to Edward from behind, asking whether it was true that he had really gotten engaged. The man rudely told others to move aside. Edward, however, was not intimidated. Calmly, he said that it had been a while since they had met. This person was Prince Garrick, the fifth prince, Garrick Leviton. He loved power, titles, and his position. Rumors said that he took full advantage of his status as a prince and did as he pleased. Liaris was not sure how much of that was true. Suddenly, he called Liaris a failure. He said that even though her family was moderately talented in psychics, she had inherited nothing and was a disgrace to the country. Liaris did not reply. Garrick did not hold back his words. According to him, it was the gifted who held the country together. Liaris grew angry at his words but tried her best to control herself. In his view, A man like Edward deserved someone better. Someone capable, not someone who could do nothing. He believed himself to be exceptional because he possessed extraordinary abilities, which was why he looked down on others. Edward cut off his brother's words and declared that Liaris was a gifted woman, and that her abilities were on par with his own. Liaris did not understand why Edward was speaking about her abilities without her permission. On the other hand, Prince Garrick did not believe Edward's words and told him to stop joking. He laughed and mocked Liaris, stepping closer to intimidate her by staring directly into her face. He insulted her appearance and said that he would never make someone who looked like her his wife, because then he would become the laughingstock of the entire nation. Liaris had heard such hateful words many times before. Arguing would only worsen the situation, and she was used to enduring such treatment. However, looking at Prince Garrick's face filled her with fury. A feeling of irreversible frustration washed over her. She stepped forward and challenged the prince, asking if he would like to be her opponent. Garrick was confused. Liaris replied that since Prince Edward had chosen her, she wanted to prove that he had made the right decision. She also wanted to convey this to Prince Garrick by using her own powers. The two stood opposite each other, an intense dark aura surrounding them as they glared at one another. Everyone moved outside and gathered around to watch. Many nobles stood at a distance. Garrick continued to mock both Liaris and Edward, while Edward calmly remained behind, saying that he would simply watch. Garrick began using his power. He raised his hand, and a massive tornado of flames burst forth. Everyone was shocked. It was a serious attack. They quickly moved back as the flames surged directly toward Liaris. However, just as the fire reached her, it suddenly disappeared. Liaris had not even dodged. Garrick was stunned. How had the flames vanished? Liaris laughed and commented that it was a nice flame, perfect for lighting up a dark night. She was clearly playing with him, which only made him angrier. He unleashed an even bigger attack this time. People began running away, afraid of being burned or caught in the flames. Yet one person stood calmly in the middle, watching the fight with interest. Liaris noticed him and thought that perhaps he was another prince like the others. The flames Garrick hurled at Liaris kept diverting away from her on their own. He could not understand why none of his attacks were touching her. The mysterious observer watching from the side was amazed. Liaris's movements looked like a graceful dance on the battlefield. It was then revealed that Liaris was not directly countering the flames. She was manipulating the airflow around her, subtly shifting the course of the fire. She even explained this to Garrick, but he was too furious to listen. Garrick was known for destroying entire organizations he disliked. It was rumored that he had burned thieves alive and possessed a rare destructive ability. Despite all that power, Liaris remarked that he had no sense of style. She deliberately taunted him to make him angrier and lose control. It was clear that her plan was working flawlessly. Now growing tired of the fight, Liaris raised a single hand and surrounded herself with ice crystals. She froze all the flames around her and continued freezing Prince Garrick as well. He collapsed to the ground. Liaris walked toward him, looking almost maniacal, while Garrick, who had never felt such intimidation before, was genuinely frightened. He had never expected to feel this way, especially at the hands of someone like Liaris. As Garrick lay on the floor, Liaris advised him not to look down on people without powers, or else he would pay a painful price for it. Edward then stepped forward and complimented Liaris, which eased the tense atmosphere and made her smile. He announced to everyone that this was Liaris's true power, and that he was convinced she was the one meant to become the next king's wife. Liaris now realized that this had been his plan all along, to reveal her power and impress everyone, even if it meant using his own brother's arrogance as a stage. She thought to herself that he was a sly and cunning man. That night, the mysterious person who had been watching Liaris during the fight was with his maid. It was clear that the maid was comfortable around him. He turned to her and said that he had seen something very interesting today. He asked about Liaris. The maid provided him with information about Liaris, that she had once been labeled incompetent and powerless, and that she was now engaged to his brother, Prince Edward. Everyone had believed she was incapable, but in reality, she had been hiding her powers. He wondered why she had hidden them and was fascinated by her strength. He wanted that power for himself. His maid reminded him that Liaris was engaged to Prince Edward, but he replied that he did not care. It did not matter who she belonged to. If he wanted something, he would get it. He declared that he would show her. He would claim Liaris for himself. He was utterly captivated by her. The next day, every noble came to meet Liaris. They complimented her on her abilities and praised her powers. They invited her to their homes as an opportunity to get closer to the future king. They were all extremely polite to her, but this constant attention was becoming overwhelming. Liaris could barely remember the name of the last man she had met. She did not even understand whether there was any real meaning behind all these meetings. Suddenly, Edward appeared from behind her. It was obvious that Liaris was annoyed by the endless meetings. Edward calmed her down, explaining that it had been her bold decision to fight his brother. Because of her actions, everyone now wanted to meet her. Since that fight, many visitors had approached her, people who were concerned only about their own interests. 3 people had come the previous day. Today, 6 had arrived. Liaris asked Edward whether it would not be better for him to handle the meetings instead. If they were his supporters, would it not be more beneficial for them to speak directly to him rather than to her? Edward replied that he was busy with other matters. Annoyed, Liaris responded that he had come all this way just to tease her and then say he had no time. Edward then clarified that the visitors were not originally his supporters. They had been Prince Garrick's supporters, but after yesterday's fight, they had switched sides. That was simply how things worked. There was not even a thread of loyalty among nobles. They were not interested in the battle itself. They were interested in what was good for them. They would support the person who seemed closest to becoming king. Liaris then asked whether, in that case, they might eventually switch sides to Prince Elisher, the first prince, when the time came. Edward told her that she was correct. However, their support was still necessary. They could not win the battle for the throne without these nobles. They would make sure that those supporters did not leave them. In her mind, Liaris thought about how people who were attracted only to power would eventually betray anyone, no matter how much strength was shown to them. She had seen it all before. Even those she once believed to be loyal had betrayed her in her past life. After speaking with Edward, she still had to meet 2 more nobles. She forced a fake smile every time she greeted them. Edward needed this support for his future, so she decided to endure it. After finishing the meetings, she was about to leave when she suddenly heard someone entering. A man walked in without prior permission. Liaris did not know who he was at first. He quickly approached her and greeted her. He was the second prince, Levedon, one of the candidates to become the next king after His Highness Elisher. The second prince began a light conversation with Liaris. He had brought 2 of his maids with him. Liaris felt uneasy about the situation. She tried to end the conversation by saying that she would call Prince Edward. However, the second prince replied that it would not be necessary. She was the one he had come to see. He took her hand, stepped closer, and told her that he wanted her. Liaris was confused and shocked by his words. Liaris tried to act confused and told him that she did not understand what he meant. He told her that he had been drawn to her power. She had displayed such an amazing ability. This made Liaris frustrated. He was just like everyone else, a person attracted only to power. She apologized and reminded him that she was engaged to Prince Edward. Still, he did not back down. He stepped closer and said that he already knew that, but he wanted her anyway. Liaris replied that if that was the case, he would have to speak to Prince Edward about it. However, he ignored her words. He said that he only needed her, and whatever she wanted, he could give her. He could give her everything. He was serious, straightforward, and arrogant. He moved closer, gently held her cheek, and told her to be his. One of his maids called out to him from behind, telling him that he was being too aggressive and that it was impolite to approach her like that. She said Liaris might be shocked. Surprisingly, he listened to his maid's words. Liaris was confused, as she had not expected him to heed a maid's advice. Before the situation could escalate further, Edward arrived. From the look on his face, he seemed furious. Without hesitation, the second prince said, "Edward, you're interrupting our conversation." Edward asked him what he wanted and what plans he was making. The second prince replied that he had not come to see Edward. He had come to see Liaris, and they were simply having a conversation. Liaris noticed that this man was incredibly confident. He was not even attempting to hide his intentions. Edward pulled Liaris closer and said that she was his fiancée, so he should stop being selfish. The second prince laughed and remarked that he had thought Edward was uninterested in women, but it seemed he had been wrong. Edward smiled slyly and pulled Liaris even closer, telling him that he had already lost her. This confused the second prince for a moment. But then he confidently replied that he could see Edward was lying. There was no love between them, only mutual interests. He added that there must be some reason why she had hidden her power all this time. Liaris now realized that this man was not just arrogant. He was perceptive. Even Edward, who was usually composed, seemed slightly unsettled in front of his brother. The second prince stated that he was not interested in their relationship. The only person he cared about was Liaris. The reason he was interested in her was simple, her power. He wanted that power. There was no other reason. He admitted openly that he was a greedy man. Humans were greedy, and it was greed that had driven the evolution of humanity and the development of nations. There was no future in a world without desire. Therefore, he intended to change this nation into one driven by true ambition. To do that, he needed power, someone as strong as Liaris. He believed that was the same reason Edward had brought her to his side. He then told Edward that he already had the power to rule the nation, so why didn't he take advantage of it? Even Liaris knew that was true. After all, Edward possessed one of the most powerful psychic abilities in the nation. Edward grew visibly angry. He told his brother that he did not like using power to force people to their knees. He was clearly frustrated and flustered, while his brother stood smiling calmly. Liaris realized that she had never seen Edward in such a state before. Look at Leviton intrigued Liaris slightly, but not in a good way. What was this proposing his brother's fiancée? And why did Liaris said Edward has the most powerful ability in the Empire? Now I am eager to know his ability. Let's see what he will do to take care of this look-at situation. To know what will happen, please support our channel. Thank you for watching.